We are recording. Andrea, can you hear me? Yep. Okay, great. Okay. I wasn't sure if I had the mute flipped on or off. Okay, thank you everyone for being here tonight. We greatly appreciate you giving up an hour of your time. My name is Allison Hubley, and I'm doing this with my colleague Jennifer Ardellini, who can say a few words about herself in just a moment. I've been an adjunct instructor with Ottawa University since 2007. And I teach courses online as well as at the Phoenix campus. We wanted to start with a slide here that has a quote on it that I really liked. Alan Farina is one of our adjunct instructors, and he also is a member of our online peer review team. Those are the folks who do your annual review for you approximately once a year. And he was sending me some information for tonight, and at the end of his email message, he had this quote, the question should not be how well are instructors teaching, but rather how well are the students learning. And I really, really liked that, and I thought that maybe we could just kind of keep that in the back of our mind tonight as we go through the webinar as well as in the future. Okay, Andrea, would you like to advance the slides, and Jennifer's going to talk about the agenda.
Again, thank you for everyone for joining. I'm Jennifer. I've actually just rolled over to my 12th year at Ottawa. I got my little LinkedIn reminder that I had been at Ottawa for 12 years. I also teach ground face-to-face courses here in Wisconsin in the School of Business. So we're going to move through some slides relatively quickly because we know we're going to have some questions. We want to be able to have some discussion. But the reason for the webinar is we want to talk about some online standards for online OU standards for online instructors. We want to talk about some of our group points for what we've seen repetitively with the online peer review team, some observations and some best practices that we've seen. There has been some student concerns. We kind of want to hit the top three. We're just going to focus on today on some announcement tips, Blackboard discussion tips. I know that we're going to have a few slides later, but we can get into each one of those announcements and discussion board tips in itself a full webinar. We're going to just keep it pretty high level today. Andrew, can you hit the next slide, please? So while Andrea is going to be monitoring the chat, we are going to try to save the questions for the end. Hopefully we'll address the questions as we move along, but feel free to, again, to unmute yourself if there's an immediate question you want to have answered, or shoot the question via chat. We're going to try to keep everything open and move along. We want to be respectful of everyone's time, and Andrea will follow up. There's a recording with this presentation along with the PowerPoint.
Okay, Andrea, could you, oh, I'm sorry, you did advance the slide. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about some of the reasons for the webinar again. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with this document, and we will show you where to find it in just a couple of minutes. The Ottawa University Standards for Online Instructors is a document that is in the My Ottawa portal under the faculty tab, and that document just recently went through a slight revision. If you are familiar with the document already, the changes were not necessarily major, but you may want to go back and revisit this. The standards for online instructors is kind of the guideline that those of us who are members of the peer review team, we use what's in the standards. We use those items when reviewing courses. So I would ask you to please take a look at that one more time. And then also with regard to the reason for the webinar, we really just kind of wanted to share with you some of the things that the 5 of us who are online peer reviewers, some of the observations that we have made over the past year or more. And again, as Jennifer said, just in the interest of time, we're only hitting the announcements and the discussion board area of the course because we understand that we could go on and on, especially if we got into grading and APA and things like that. And as Jennifer also said, we will talk to you a little bit about the student concerns that Andrea hears. And that's actually the next slide, if you'd like to advance that. And Jennifer's going to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. So one of the top 3 areas that we hear some feedback on, and we're going to address as we go through, but there's kind of 3 areas that we're calling student frustration. And one of the ones as a online peer review team, and it potentially could get back to other instructors, is that there is a sense that in some cases the instructors are not active in the discussion board. And that could be what we call our digital footprint. We want to provide some tips for that. That there's a general lack of overall presence in the course, and grading turnaround time. That is something that we definitely want to focus on in terms of being sure that we grade, return papers within a reasonable amount of time, because with 8 weeks we have such a short time to get up to speed and keep the pace of the course going.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the OU standards for online instructors. Andrea, if you could please advance the slide once more. Thank you. If you, again, are not familiar with where this document resides, this is the My Ottawa portal under the faculty tab, and you can see it right there under the category of other faculty resources, standards for online instructors, where the red arrow was pointing to. It is a Microsoft Word document. Just click on it and it's very easy to download. It's not terribly lengthy. It's a few pages, but I'm sorry, Andrea, would you advance the slides again, please? It's not terribly lengthy, but for purposes of this webinar, what Jennifer and I did is we went through the document together, and keeping in mind that we are members of the peer review team, we pulled out 5 key components, things that we really wanted to share with you and kind of emphasize tonight. Let's talk about the first one, which is establishing presence. I can't speak for all of the peer review team, but I know that oftentimes when I prepare a review, I will conduct it and then write the comments to the faculty member. I will say, you're doing a great job establishing presence in the class or leaving that digital footprint. Clearly this can be done through announcements and in the discussion board, but you want to do whatever you possibly can to establish a very solid presence in the class. It should be obviously very obvious who the facilitator is, and just do whatever you can to leave that digital footprint. Building strong communication, one area that we really want to talk about are the announcements. We do see some courses that have wonderful announcements in them, and then we see some courses where the announcements could be improved upon a little bit, but this really is a great area of the course for you to share a great deal of good information. We'll talk about what we suggest you share in that area in a few minutes, as well as still building, or leaving your digital footprint or establishing your presence can be done in the announcement area of the class as well. Significant assignment and APA feedback, even though we're not talking about grading tonight or getting into any of that, we do want to point out to you that this is in the standards, and please read that section of the document. Please be very careful that you are giving a decent amount of feedback so that the student can learn from their mistakes. Again, this is kind of across the board. We see some faculty members who do a great job in this area, and some that probably could stand to give a little bit more feedback to the students. Your tone, active, energetic, expressive. Try to, let your personality shine through. Even though you're not in the classroom, you can still, quote unquote, talk to them in a way that I think you allow your personality to come through. And they do like it when someone is very expressive and upbeat. That comes through on end of course surveys. So we would ask you to really watch your tone as well. And then focus on grading turnaround time. I personally don't see too many issues with this. We like to sort of have grades submitted or put back to the student within 7 days of when an assignment was due. I know that several of us, we do encourage the faculty to maybe the first couple of weeks try to get those grades in by Wednesday or Thursday of week 1 or week 2, so that if you're seeing some problem areas, the student doesn't go on to the week 2 assignment without having the benefit of your feedback, and then they make the same mistake again. So please just be very careful about your grading turnaround time and try not to let it go more than the 7 days.
Hey, Allison, I just do you want me to jump in? I have a question in the chat that's kind of relevant to this.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So Dr. Carter asked, well, when he gets the opposite comments from students about being in the discussion, sometimes they're concerned when he poses questions, but I think we'd much rather hear concerns that you're being too much in the class than you're not being in the class at all. But he did have a question, what about emails? He's had a lot of email contact with students that he does not feel are appropriate for announcements. Should we keep track of those emails to students?
Were they just asking a question about something pertaining to the class? I think, I don't know, I'm not, again, speaking for all of us, but I oftentimes will tell students if you'd like to post that question in the course cafe, because that's the public forum area of the class. Otherwise, you can email me privately. I'm not sure if I'm understanding or if I'm hitting what it is that he would like us to comment about. We are going to talk in a minute about a faculty that are engaged in this discussion board, because I know that there are some faculty and some students who look at the discussion board as if that is just an area for the students to converse back and forth in. So we do have a couple of comments about that when we get to the discussion board area. But with regard to the emails, I know that I get quite a few too, but sometimes I will ask if they could also post that question, or I'll turn their email question into an announcement, because I felt that it was important enough to share with everyone. Is that what we were looking for?
Dr. Carter, you can unmute and jump in, but I think that's great. I think it's good if students are posting their questions in the course cafe to benefit everybody.
Yes, okay, I see a couple of people commenting that they turned those email questions into an announcement. So I think if we just use that as a best practice, that's probably a great idea, okay? We'll have a little bit more on that. Okay, would you be able to advance the slides, please, Andrea? Okay.
This was just to kind of really just talk about the actual online review team members. You can move to the next slide.
Yeah, there we go.
Of course, we're always looking for new team members, but each of these team members, Nicole, Alan, Amy, Allison, myself, we are focused on specific areas of reviewing within our area of specialty. We are designed to, I'm sorry, can you move to the next slide? We look at courses once a year, and it's really I'm not quite sure how it's selected, Randy, but I believe it's random selection of courses between business, healthcare, education, psychology, liberal arts. And the team is really just focused on providing an overall assessment, and we really spend a lot of time providing tips for development. And the online standards is what is our benchmark, or what we measure up against for our assessment on whether or not we're meeting them. So what you're seeing here on the screen right now, when we do fill out a peer review evaluation, these are the questions that we respond on, and it is a simple a rating, and we can add comments. And we're looking for things, again, for that digital presence. And I know some of the questions earlier, or the comments in the chat, were about email. The difficulty with email is that if I review the course, I don't know if there's been extra communication, and of course, and many times there is, with the overall presence of an instructor. I know some instructors email each student individually, but when we can, if we can pose general feedback or general questions in the course cafe, I say things like, I've received some questions regarding, and then kind of explain it from there. That way we know that as an instructor, there is that constant, I guess I call it touch point. So these are just some of the questions, or actually this is all the questions right here condensed, if you do receive an online peer evaluation from us. So we're looking at things like, are you adding additional content? Are you having that an expressive tone? Are you energetic? What kind of comments are you adding in or grading for APA, things of that nature? Does anyone, I'm assuming online, has received one of these at some point?
Yeah, everybody on here should have.
Okay, so it's not unfamiliar. Thanks, Andrea. So the next area is announcements, and they have, this is where I think we can really make an impact. And a solid announcement can really add a lot of depth to summarizing concepts for the week, or you lead in to upcoming topics. That's one of the, I guess, one of the big areas that I comment on and when I review courses from instructors, is not simply just regurgitating what the syllabus assignment is or the upcoming reading of a chapter. With courses that are particularly difficult, like the finance or mathematical courses, sometimes having that lead in of topic and an example of how it can be used is great. It helps kind of relieve some of that stress. It's important to add your instructor perspective. Be that coach. I like to add a lot of examples and current events, and you can do that with links to articles, YouTube videos, TED Talks, adding specific library resources, pictures. You can really have a lot of fun and be very diverse with your announcements. I always generally try to add general APA grading feedback where it applies. I will say things like, strong writing from everyone, please note, especially at the beginning of the term where I might see some more common mistakes, I'll say things like, don't forget the text has 2 authors, et cetera, et cetera. And also some upcoming reminders as we go throughout an announcement of what is going to be coming up.
We did have a question. Is there any sort of requirement for the length on the posting for announcements?
No, I don't think there's a requirement on the length. I think what we would like to have is some depth and have them be a little bit more substantive. The ones that get to be relatively lengthy have multiple links. That they will have those recaps. They'll have some sort of, as we discussed, and they might even recap some of what they was all read in the discussion forum. So there's not really any length requirement, but to get all of these points listed here on the slide, it's generally going to be at least 3 to 4 paragraphs, and unless maybe you can bullet some areas. One of the things that one of the online peer review instructors, Alan, had also mentioned, and I think Nicole mentioned it as well, is you can also add, especially in the welcome announcement, add your office hours, or when are you going to be available. I like to add course expectations, especially on whether or not you're going to accept late assignments. And I also kind of put a blurb in there, as a student, I expect or require that you email me if you're going to miss an assignment. So I kind of just, the first week announcement is generally my longest one because I'm kind of throwing a lot of information at them. Some people use time to add Zoom links if they're going to have online collaboration. So really be diverse with them. I see other questions popping up. Anything I can address?
There's lots of discussion right now. I'm sorry, my dog's barking. There's lots of discussion right now about the actual discussion in the class, which I think we're going to be getting to. Okay. But if anybody has any announcement related questions, feel free to unmute or type them in the chat.
If we can go on to the next slide too, I might actually answer some questions. So some of the best practices, and when we have reviewed courses, they are generally, they might have a lot of mid-week announcements. I like to post things like, grades, I have reviewed all papers, feel free to, go in and take a look, or discussion forum has been graded. So I might have some shorter midweek ones. However, I do like to have one posted generally at the same time. So I like to post mine on on Sundays for my recap of the previous week and leading into the next one. So whatever that cadence is for you, I generally like to see one longer one. And I do see a lot of instructors that do like a weekly recap, so to speak. Some of the great ones that we've seen have been really encouraging and upbeat. I like to add some bullets or numbers to kind of bold out and draw attention to some specific areas, and just have a lot of fun with your announcements. One thing I want to point out, and I do comment on the peer review evaluations, the course evaluations, is just be mindful of ADA. Sometimes when fonts get a little too small or too big or too script with sizes and colors, we have to just be careful of ADA and making it easy for everyone who might have some disabilities along that nature. So I tend to make comments if people are using yellow fonts or green fonts or blue fonts. So something to be mindful of. One of Alan's comments in regards to best practices and announcements is that he likes to really go beyond the number of days or number of postings and really kind of focusing on some critical thinking questions or comments to kind of get people thinking about the subject matter that was just discussed and maybe what is going to be upcoming. And then one of the important notes that we do want to make mention of is, please, because the online peer review team cannot see an announcement, if you set an expiration date to it, it actually is no longer visible. Please do not set an expiration date. Otherwise, we tend to sometimes get, I post it every week, and I make a note that I don't see any announcements for the week. So if that's something that can be noted as we go forward, I would appreciate that, because I always feel bad when someone has made a lot of announcements and I don't see them. And I might give you development feedback on that, not knowing you have a lot of announcements already posted. So next slide, please. What I like to do is I try to be consistent in regards to how I have my naming conventions for my weekly announcements. So for example, I actually use wrapping up week 2, heading into week 3. That way the students know that weekly recap announcement is going to be one of the longer ones, but I might put a quick blurb in there, midweek announcement, grades are posted, or here's week 1 instructor guidance. I might have some shorter ones, but I like to have that consistent naming convention. And we've seen that as well in the courses that we've reviewed. I mentioned earlier, I do a as we get started type announcement along with my welcome announcement. I like to set the stage, what is accepted, not accepted in terms of late work. Someone mentioned, I can't remember, Allison, who it was, that they actually posted a time zone map, which was interesting. I can't remember who that was, Allison, but I thought that was a great tip as well. And also, I also like to email my announcement immediately. I know that they do get a notification that there is an announcement in Blackboard, but I do like to email it out. And the next slide. Here's actually an example of, these are actually my announcements. So what I was trying to point out here is that if you don't know how to add links or videos or images, we'd be more than happy to help you. But this is just a quick example of bulleting some points, adding a link within. Here's the heading that I have, but adding a link within so that it launches. You can also add videos right from your Blackboard announcement. So I like to draw out an upcoming topic, or if I found an interesting speaker on something. If I do add a video, I try to keep them shorter, maybe around like no longer than a 15-20 minute video if I can find something. And then you can also add images if you need a snippet of a graph or something, so it is kind of a nice visual as you look through. an announcement. So we can certainly help you if you don't know how to add any of those. But those are the types of things that I look at, and that I try to see if there's presence of that within the course throughout the 8 weeks.
Okay.
Allison?
All right, let's move to the discussion board portion of the webinar. On that slide that was up just before this one, there was a little quote there that says where the teaching happens. And the reason I put that on there, I don't know about all of you, but I have been to some conferences for online faculty where they have actually used this phrase. They've said, you know, the discussion board is where your teaching occurs, either because you are correcting students who've posted incorrect information, or you're sharing factual information about your subject, or your personal war stories based on your work experience or whatever. So I just put that up there just for you to think about that, whether or not you agree or disagree with that statement. How we broke out the next couple of slides is best practices for large courses versus small courses. So again, kind of keeping the Ottawa University standards for online instructors in the back of your mind, and that we'd like you to have a presence and a digital footprint in the class. What we listed here for large courses is attempt to acknowledge each student one time per week or one time every other week. Again, this could be a class that's 15, 20, 25 students. I don't know about all of you, but we do see quite a few faculty who, if they pose a question, they do then take the time to circle back to the student to respond. Supplemental material is very appropriate for the discussion board. Keep in mind that there was a category on the peer review form, adds interesting supplemental and current event information or something to that effect. You do have the authority to add additional things into your course, and sometimes the discussion board area is a great place for that. What several faculty do, and this is also absolutely fine, is they will observe a thread and it'll say, in response to this thread, you know, dear Sue, John, and Bill, or maybe even a comment to the entire class. That's fine too. We do see quite a few faculty who address 2, 3, 4 students, and then they mention their name when they make their post, which I think is nice, because I think that sends a message to the student that you're acknowledging them. At least they feel acknowledged, as opposed to just doing a post that maybe addresses the entire class. Andrea, can you go to the next slide, please? For small courses, we listed here, acknowledge each student at least one time per week. This may be necessary to keep the discussion going, as opposed to attempt to do that. We think that if you have a class where you're dealing with 2, 3, 4, 5 students, that sometimes that discussion board can sort of die out by midweek, and you may very well have to touch each person once during the week or more, just to keep that discussion going. I've seen this a number of times where faculty have just done a phenomenal job of, they keep going back, they keep kind of hitting them, you know, over and over again with, you know, new ideas and advancing that conversation to a higher level just to get them to participate. Again, same thing. If you pose a question to them, please try to circle back to them so that they feel as if you did bother to take the time to read their response, and then you're commenting again. And then, of course, with the small classes, just as with large, any class, you can add supplemental material to the discussion board and then ask for comment. Okay, Andrea, could you please advance the slides? Okay, this, I believe, is one of the topics that was mentioned at the start of the webinar. We put, if appropriate in your course, inform students that a reply to the instructor does count towards their weekly replies, their point count. That is up to you, but I cannot believe the number of questions that I've had from students over the years where they've said to me, well, if I reply to you, is that going to count? And I say, absolutely. I may be the instructor, I may not be the peer, but if you take the time to respond to me, I'm definitely going to, you know, count that towards your credit for the week. I just put by responding to the instructor, no additional work is required. If you're supposed to respond to 2 peers for each prompt during the week, I will count your response to me as one of those, you know, peer replies. So you don't have to go over and above what I'm asking you to do. Let's see, there were a couple of questions here that Bruce had brought up that I wanted to mention. He had asked way back, if you read up in the chat pod there, about length of post, the nature of a substantive post, what exactly is that? And he said, at least I believe it was Bruce, that students just feel that if they participate, they should get the points, points for doing so. I'd like to address a couple of those things. With regard to the substantive nature of a post, I sort of have some canned language that I've turned into an announcement that I put in all of my courses, and then I'll also put this in the feedback for each week. If I have to, I'll say, find a post, see what you can pick up on that you can address. You can spin off on something to advance the conversation to a higher level. And then I just go back and say, you can't simply just say, I agree or disagree, or get off on a tangent about some other topic. We know that some little sidebar conversations sometimes pop up in the discussion board. I'll say, you need to stay on topic. I also will tell them that if they'd like to put a link to a YouTube video or some kind of video, an article, they can maybe summarize that and share the link with us and tell us, you know, hey, check this out. This is what this is all about. I tell them that it's appropriate for them to do that as well. And I actually have had some students email me beforehand and say, I found this video or I found this article. Are you okay with me putting this in the class? And I'll, you know, look at what it is that they're going to pop in the class, and I'll say, yes, absolutely, that's great. With regard to the length of the post, I think we're talking here about the students. Again, I don't think I saw back and forth here some conversation about I require at least 150 words or, you know, whatever. I think that you just have to decide what have they done to meet that criteria that they have posted a substantive post. Have they met that in your mind? I don't think that they can do that in, you know, 1, 2, 3 sentences. I think they have to go beyond that. I read the post and look at what the content is so that it's not just excessive wordiness. I actually want to look to see, you know, what are they putting, you know, in that post. I don't know, Bruce, if that's the kind of thing that you were, you know, looking for or not.
And Allison, if I could just jump in for a second, yes. That was one of the things I forgot to mention too. When I do my course expectations, if I'm going to accept late work or if I'm expecting a student to email me, I also do put in there for discussions for it to be considered substantive. I expect it to be at least, you know, a paragraph or something. So I think setting that clarification in an announcement and you're sort of getting started, and maybe a reminder if we're not seeing that throughout the course is a good idea. Everyone's perception of what is an in-depth discussion posting can vary, so I think that clarification also helps students and set the stage.
I agree, absolutely. Bruce also asked how many posts are required. I can't speak for everyone, but in all of the courses that I teach at Ottawa, my syllabi say that you have to respond to a minimum of 2 peers for each prompt. So that's going to be 4 right there if there's 2 discussion forum questions, as well as your 2 original responses where the student themselves, you know, is answering the weekly discussion forum question. So that's going to be 6. Now, I know that some people do not have 2 questions in their discussion forum, or there have been some slight changes to the course that you're teaching, or our courses are not all, you know, exactly the same. So I know that that's what I go by. I go by a minimum of 2 peer responses for each prompt. And I don't know if anybody would like to comment on that necessarily. Todd, I was wondering if you could unmute yourself and just say a brief word about your AAR method. In preparation for tonight's webinar, Jennifer and I emailed several faculty, and you're seeing a lot of these tips are not necessarily ours, they're from these other folks as well. And I did want to ask Todd just to talk briefly about his ask, affirm, and redirect method in the discussion forum, which may actually be a future professional development topic. Would you be able to talk briefly about that, Todd?
Absolutely. Thanks, Allison.
Okay.
Everyone can hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So this is a method that I developed many years ago. I've been teaching online since 2009. And I developed this really for myself as an instructor. I would find myself getting into the discussions not knowing what to say or feeling like I'm regurgitating some of the same information. So I started playing this game with myself called Ask, Affirm, and Redirect. And what I would do is go into the forum on the days that I'm going to participate in the discussions. And if Allison has made a post, I will make a point to respond to Allison's post and ask Allison a question. I may then see that Andrea made a post, and I will then, in response to Andrea's post, I may affirm something that Andrea said. Perhaps I'll say, you know, Andrea, you make a really great point. In my own experience, I have found this or that or this. And then I will go on, and let's say Jennifer's made a post. I will make a point to redirect Jennifer. So maybe I will share some kind of outside resource or some kind of an article or a publication. And then I just go back through and do that again. Ask for the next student, affirm for the next one, redirect for the next one. 2 quick points on that. Number one, it keeps me entertained. And it helps to kind of keep it from being so boring for me as the instructor. B, I think it mixes the discussion up a bit, so the students really do feel like I'm paying attention to them because I'm asking Andrea a specific question or affirming something that Allison said. And the other thing I just wanted to mention about this is that several years after doing this, then I started sharing this method with my students. So I discovered that they had some of the same challenges that we have, which is we're in the discussions, what do I say? Andrea already pointed that out, or Allison's already talked about that. So I started sharing this method with them, and I asked them to play this game as well. So the benefit is it's more interesting, I think, for them. It keeps the discussions a little more lively. If I can ever help with any of that, just let me know. I'd be happy to share more. Allison, is that what you were hoping for there?
Yes, and I'm going to ask you to stay on for just a moment if you could, because I put these 2 items together. Could you just talk about the benefit of the discussion board from a knowledge retention standpoint when you and your colleague did that study?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a study a few years back with a colleague of mine, and we surveyed a bunch of online students, not at one particular school, just online students. And we asked those students a couple of key questions, some of which the information surprised us and some it didn't. One of the questions we asked was, what kind of activities do you see in an online classroom? And as you can imagine, they answered things like writing research papers and participating in discussions or doing web quests or creating PowerPoint presentations. We then asked them, of all of those types of assignments and activities in a class, which ones do you like the most? We really weren't surprised that the vast majority of those that we surveyed said they liked the discussions more than any of the other activities. And we, of course, being a little skeptical, we said, well, that's probably because it's pretty easy. You just get in there, you respond to Andrea, bada bing, bada boom. I don't have to write a paper. My work here is done. But what did surprise us is the response to the next question, which was, of all of the activities in an online classroom, which activity helps you to retain the most knowledge? And what those students overwhelmingly told us is that they learn more and they remember more from the discussion. As an educator, that made me sit up straight. I thought and I happen to teach healthcare courses, a lot of healthcare courses, so I thought, wow, if the students are retaining the information from the discussions, I better make sure that I'm in those discussions and that they actually have the correct information. If not, we're putting all these students out there in the real world, working at hospitals and long-term care facilities, and they do not have the right information. So I just think, in summary, I think it just speaks to the power of the discussions. Not only do students really like them, but they're retaining knowledge from there. So if you're not an active participant in that, imagine how wrong that could go.
You know, Ted, that's a great point, because I think it really helps a student see a concept or a theory from multiple perspectives, and it kind of continues to build on that critical thinking. And when students can share an experience regarding a specific topic, I think that really does hit home, and they can relate to it and apply it immediately in their work or in their further study. So,
you know, absolutely, Jennifer. And, you know, one of the interesting things that these two bullets are here together on the slide, they actually play really well with each other. If we know that the students are retaining the information from the discussions, and we know that that's what they really enjoy and they're really in there, if you know how important that is, then following this method of asking, affirming, and redirecting helps you to stay connected to the students, what they know, what they don't know, where there are opportunities to expand their knowledge, and it gives you a chance to go, actually, Jennifer, I would like you to check out this article, or I'd like you to check out this video. Based on that, do you still feel the same as your original post? It is a real opportunity. I think Allison mentioned it earlier, but it's a real opportunity for us to actually teach.
I agree. I kind of also like to play that devil's advocate once in a while and challenge somebody too, to
absolutely
twist things around a little bit. Someone had just posted, it says it's from an iPhone, so I'm not sure who did, but they use student strategies for the classroom that they use the next day. So that's great too, to continue that as a teaching.
I just want to mention that when I had a conference call with Todd last week to discuss this in preparation for tonight's webinar, I also asked him if he had any strategies. I think all of us probably can pick out the student in the online class who would be the student that would be trying to hide from us sitting in the back row if it was an on-ground class. Maybe they sit back and post at the very last minute, or the posts aren't very substantive. And I asked him if he had any strategies for pulling that person more into the discussion. And he did say that in the ask phase of the AAR method, that he kind of, maybe asked that person some higher level questions or additional questions, but does recognize who they are and tries to pull them into the conversation as much as possible. Because I think we all probably can pick out those students that are not necessarily going to be very participative. Okay, Andrea, could you please advance the slides? We did have a faculty member who sent in a comment. One more time, please. That she had always been hoping that we would have a training or teaching tips blog or do something like this. And when she used the word blog, it just kind of made Jennifer and I wonder what you all think of this idea. We're not necessarily asking you to register your vote tonight, but maybe you could email us, over the next week or two, or Andrea could put something out there. As what we know about blogs is that they need to be maintained. Information has to be posted fairly often so that they're fresh and current. I don't know. I'd ask you to think about, as a faculty member, is this something you would participate in? If we had 20 or 25 of us that would like to do this, if we did 2 posts to the blog a month, maybe your turn would not come around all that frequently. I don't know if this is something that you find interesting or not. And then I would just ask you to tell us, if you are interested in this, what types of topics would you like to see addressed in the blog? So anyone, I see a few people who've already commented that they would like to, but let us know what you think about this. And then I can talk to Andrea about that. Okay, if you could advance the slide for Jennifer, please.
So I mentioned earlier that we are always looking for future professional development sessions. If you have any great ideas, I know we're going to have the one for Todd's top 10. Is that going to be like a Letterman, Todd?
Yeah.
Well,
I think we should. That would be fun.
It is, but I will tell you, I told Allison, the reason I always do professional development in a top 10 format is that if I really, really suck, at least you know how long I'm going to continue to suck.
I'm sure that won't be the case, but there's things like the blog ideas. We could probably get into announcements and discussions all by itself, but we want to make sure that we put development sessions or quick webinars out that are impactful and beneficial for everyone. So please contact Andrea if you have an idea. The one that is upcoming, I'm not quite sure when it is going to be, but it's going to be Todd's Top 10. We look forward to that. So we're going to get in a little bit more in depth, I'm assuming, with what you mentioned earlier, Todd, and more information on announcements and discussion boards. But someone had mentioned earlier, I think students really want and expect us to challenge them and to make the course. I always describe the discussion forum to students as me posing a question and we're having a week-long conversation about it. Bigger classes right now, I have a course I think it's got 25 students in it. It's a little hard to manage when you have that many students in terms of, so I sometimes do a lot of group replies, but I do try to touch base. So I'm not quite sure which one's easier or harder, large courses or smaller courses, but. So please reach out to Andrea if you have any ideas for that.
Yeah, and I did say in the chat, we have another training coming up. One of our full-time online faculty, Fred Romero, will be doing a training on working with students that have ADA requirements. So I don't have the date in front of me, but I know it's going to be coming up soon. So.
Yeah, someone just mentioned an idea about diversity, culture, retention, working with advisors. Yeah, there's probably a very long list of ideas. So thank you for that. And we really do want to hear about the blog idea. If you like it, would you use it? How can we use it? So please give that feedback as well. Next slide, please. So we are if we can unmute everyone, if there are specific questions, or if anyone has a really great announcement. I couldn't quite keep up with the chat as it was going on and moving the slides, but if we could open it up a little bit, we have some time. If anyone has some great tips that they use either for an announcement or discussion forum, or if you just have questions, toss them at us, please.
Jennifer, I just wanted to add one thing. When we were looking at your slides about the announcements, the same faculty member who said that he posts the announcement that shows the time zone map so that they can kind of understand based on where they live in the country and when assignments are due according to the Blackboard clock. That same individual does two other things that I really like. He posts an announcement to students, I believe it's called Preparing for the Unexpected. So that, in other words, think now about what your plan B is going to be if you have, technical problems or whatnot. I think that's really important depending on where you come down in terms of accepting late work or not accepting late work. The other announcement that he posts is, I believe it was called My Weekly Schedule. And what I really liked about that is he would tell students, I'm not in the classroom on this day. I will be in the cyber classroom on these days. You can expect grades to be posted on this day of the week. And he said that it sounds like it really does cut down on quite a few questions. And I really liked that. I don't know that we can always commit to what our schedule will be for the full week on a Sunday night or a Monday when we're making these posts, but it really looked nice in the class, and he had indicated that it seemed to be helpful to the students. So I just wanted to throw those other two out there.
That's a good point because, I didn't teach last term. So this term started, a week ago already? We were on week 2 already. My laptop died. Of course, because the term started and I had to go to my full-time job and send a quick announcement that I was going to be unavailable. But you're right, I do try to post myself. Grades will be posted by Thursday, or please expect them to, you'll see grades posted by a certain day. I like that idea as well. Carla, hi Carla, by the way. One of the ideas for a blog, Andrea, would be, does Fred have any tips on incorporating video feedback or other innovative ways to engage students? That might be a good blog one. Someone else mentioned also having a Plan B announcement, so good. And the grading timeline. So I think the more we can clarify for our students the pace of the course, the cadence of the course, things that might pop up unexpectedly, it really kind of helps the students' stress level and anxiety a little bit.
Well, and also I think it helps to remove obstacles to success and excuses. So I know earlier you guys you were talking about the importance of not making it so your announcements disappear. And one of the things I had said in the chat pod is I keep all announcements open the entire course, because it's a nice tool to be able to go back and go, you know, I covered this in my week 3 announcement, go check that out, and then let me know if you have additional questions. Number one of, I think, are the biggest complaints I hear from faculty is, well, students don't read my announcements. And so I try to refer those students back to those announcements, and it gets them in the habit of, number one, checking the announcements, and number two, you can't make the claim that something hadn't been put out there that was put out there.
Yeah, that's true. I do that, especially if I see a student because I even put down how to cite the textbook.
Right.
And what so I'll even, give a few examples, and even in my feedback to students, I will say, in addition to adding the links and the specific feedback on an assignment, I will also say, please refer back to my week 2 announcement, and I clarify that as well. And
I think it's a time savings for the instructor, but also starts to reinforce the need for students to read those things and check those announcements when they log into the course, and make that kind of get into a good habit of doing that as a regular practice.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Lisa Lincoln just made a comment in the chat pod that "What You Can Expect from Me" is a great title for an announcement, and I would agree with that. We have several faculty who will do something like expectations, and they'll start out by saying, "What I expect from you as the student," and then they'll flip it around and say, "Here's what you can expect from me." And I think that's very nice as well.
Yep, I agree.
Does anybody have anything for us? Questions, or would you like to share something that you do?
Someone mentioned sending videos. That's great.
Lisa, can you give us an example of what you do? She said change the subject line in discussions. I like that. I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with that, but do you have an example? Oh, okay. If I ask a question, I will also put that in the subject line.
I reviewed a course once that an instructor posted midweek, "Here's my midweek thoughts," as a discussion thread separate from the prompts that they had within that week, and then said, if you choose, or they might say, this is an extra question or an extra thought, and then it has sort of a separate dialogue on that as well. So you can be creative with the discussion form and add supplemental information, additional threads, just to keep that dialogue going. Oh, Carla, that's great. Carla just mentioned that she had two amazing papers from week 1 from 2 students. They were spot on, and they allowed her to share the papers So that was great that you posted it to announcement. So.
Very good.
A lot of great ideas. So I know we're going to be just shy up on time pretty soon. We got just a few minutes left. I know Todd's webinar will also get into more depth with discussion and announcements. So we don't want to take away from any of what Todd might be doing in his top 10. But we just really wanted to focus on the online peer review team, what the standards are and what we're looking for in courses, and just some general feedback on when we see some gaps. It's generally in the areas of not having enough information in the announcements, or just simply cutting and pasting a snippet from the syllabus and making that the announcement in the discussion form. And we know we can go into lots of discussion, and there's a lot of chat going on right now on some great ideas.
Yes, this was excellent. Thank you both, Jennifer and Allison, and thank you, Todd, for jumping in with your tips, and hopefully we'll be having a webinar from you soon. So if anybody on this meeting has any questions or they want to follow up, you can email me and I can get you in touch with Allison and Jennifer, and we can get some discussion going. But other than that, is there anything else, Allison and Jennifer?
No, I would just reiterate to please email Jennifer or I, one or both of us. You've got our names, and you can find us easily in email, but let us know your thoughts about the blog.
Yep. Yes, and I will be sending out the recording along with the PowerPoint slides whenever I hear from Allison on that. So,
okay. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.